Hi, I'm Paul.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the People's Podcast. I am your host, Paul Vibes, local motivational speaker. Our show is all about spirituality, self-development, connection, wellness. Please be sure to subscribe and follow us on a variety of different social media pages. If you know somebody that would be a great guest to our show or sponsor, please reach out. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Paul Vibes here. I'm super excited. We have a good friend of mine and mentor, Corrie Lo. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. You are one of the very first few guests on the virtual video podcast for the People's Podcast. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Sure. Many of us had the privilege, and it's on YouTube now. You recently had a TED Talk. Congratulations. How did that feel?
Thank you. Oh my God, it was amazing. No, something I never expected for myself. I've always been a big fan of TED Talks. I love them. I watch them. Never seemed like something that would be within the realm of something I would achieve myself. So I'm still kind of wrapping my brain around the fact that it even happens, but super cool experience.
Well, it's interesting because from your story and also from the walks that we have, and we have a cool little walking video, people should check that out as well in Heckscher Park. For me, you seem like somebody that helps people from the point where they're thinking they can't do this, or how do I do this, or how do I get to the next level? And you're like that person that kind of motivates them and helps them get through that next phase. So it's interesting for me to hear you say that, like, I could never have imagined. So it kind of shows you that you've been through this transformation. And I think you kind of share that during your TED Talk, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, for the most part, in general, there's never been much that I thought I couldn't achieve. Mm-hmm. It was just more with the TED Talk. It was one of those things I never really visualized myself as being a speaker. Right. So it wasn't one of those things, because I think of TED Talks, and for me, I would think it would be like, like doctors and like PhDs and all these like people with lots of letters after their last name, which I am not. I have an art degree. So that's probably more wrapping my brain around the TED Talk. It's not something I ever kind of envisioned myself doing, but I'm kind of glad I put, my head to it and figured it out. And this is my son, by the way.
What's his name?
He's going to crash right now. Jameson.
I don't know if you can hear me because you got headphones on. Hey, buddy.
I can't hear you. You want to wave? You want to say hi? Hi. We're on a podcast.
You hungry?
Hey, hi,
Well, I have a son too. Yeah.
Why? Because Paul has some questions he wants to ask me.
You like my jacket, buddy? You can hear me? You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Very cool. I have a son as well, so I know. So, very cool. So you have this, it's funny. Speaking of art, your art degree, you have very nice aesthetics, and I've seen a lot of your posts on Instagram, which I recommend everybody watching this go follow you on Instagram.
Thank you.
Like, you have a very artsy way about you. Even the way you dressed that day, it was very cool. Got the red to match the TED Talk, and a lot of your posts has a very artsy vibe.
Yes. Well, I mean, I went to art school. I initially thought I was going to be a painter or something like that. And I always,
background, right? Is that your painting in the background?
It's not one of mine. No, that was one I bought. I do have some of my pieces that are around my office, but you just can't see it where the camera is. But with that said, while I was in school, I really enjoyed digital media. Just because certain things like painting and charcoal and stuff like that, I didn't like getting dirty because I'm kind of like OCD. So I liked with digital, I could still kind of have a creative output, but I didn't have to like get my hands messy. So I started playing around a lot with like website video production was a big one. I actually got accepted to NYU Film School and I didn't go.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But with that said, when I got out of college, I didn't know what to do for a job, because you have a expensive piece of paper that says you could draw well, but it doesn't necessarily get you a job. And I got my start working for my father's company as a graphic designer. It was one of those things like, oh, you need a job, I guess you should come work for me. And 15 years later, I kind of blinked and I worked my way up and was senior vice president. So that's how I got my business education. It was actually working in my family's business and not necessarily through college.
Wow. And you share that, and for the viewers at home, share a little bit about, your story is kind of what you were talking about, obviously, in your TED Talk. So for the people watching this who maybe didn't watch your TED Talk or know too much about you, share with us a little bit about your story and how it led you to doing the awesome work you're doing, which is helping different business owners and individuals.
Sure. Well, the story starts with the way I just shared it. So I went to art school, didn't know what to do when I got out, took a job with my family's company, and 15 years later worked my way up and was running it. I was the third generation to do so, super, super proud of it. Went through a series of, I call them pivotal life moments, and I talk about it in my TED Talk, but all told, in a span of 5 years, I experienced a miscarriage, an abusive marriage. I got divorced. And then shortly after that, my long-term partner post-divorce died of suicide. So going through all of that made me kind of reconsider. And it ultimately was the loss of my partner that really made me reconsider what I was doing with my life, because, and what I talk about in the TED Talk, I'm a very, very motivated individual. I don't have an off switch. So I don't understand how that works. So in my mind, after I had my son and I was going through the divorce and I was really pushing myself, I mean, in the TED Talk, I share a story on how I realized I was commuting 20 hours a week and I never got to see my son. I saw him, the most I was able to get to see him was through the security cameras in my house, which is really kind of sad when you think about it. And that still wasn't enough to incite a change in me. And it really took losing someone I loved, to suicide, to really make me kind of see the world differently and want to lead my life differently. So it was at that time I stepped down from leadership in my family's business. I am still involved, but I didn't want to be, running it at that point. And I decided to start my own business, which is what I'm doing today. And I work as a one-on-one coach for small business owners, as well as do professional speaking.
I'm really glad you made that transition as hard as it could be. And I'm sure I have a lot of friends that have to make that transition with their family jobs. And often it's very difficult. And I can tell when we've talked, and even the advice you've given me is like, you're invested. You love what you do. You're passionate about it. And I feel like you're like me. You don't even look at your job as a job. For me personally, and I think we both could agree, it's just like life. It's just doing what we love. It's extremely worth it. And
that's one of the things that my family had taught me. My dad and my uncle are both business partners, and they would always give like all this business advice while I was growing up. And I remember one of the things they always emphasized was, you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you're doing. And truth was, I did love what I was doing there, but I felt it was such a niche market in what my family's business does. They're an electronics distributor. So it's a very, very small subset of like retail and small business. And I felt like I could serve a much larger audience. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of go into business coaching for myself, so that I could have a greater impact.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you made that transition as difficult as it was. And I remember you in the TED Talk, you said you were sitting on the lawn. I remember when the police were there during that time, and you were looking, you said you were thinking about, you were spending a part-time salary to pay for this au pair or nanny to watch your child. And it was amazing. You had this realization, and we talk a lot, you and I, about how, suffering can be the greatest teacher.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, because of the different business coach, you mentioned how this motivated you to really take action in your life and do what you want, and to do the business coaching you do now. You see a lot of people who go through, and currently in this day and time with the coronavirus, and not even besides the coronavirus, there's a lot of challenges people are going through in everyday life. And how do you work with individuals that are going through deep pains, whether it's personal or business pains or growing pains with their businesses? There's a lot of resistance and difficulties that go throughout, individuals with these different businesses. I mean, what do you say to somebody who is suffering right now in this day and age?
Sure. Well, I'm super clear on this when I speak about it, because it's something I'm very passionate about. So my personal mission, what I feel I was kind of put on this earth to do, is to help people see their challenges as opportunities to learn and not as excuses, right? Because it's much, much easier when something gets difficult or something gets uncomfortable to just remain where you are than to just push through it and pop out the other side. And a lot of times, the only thing that's really needed to be able to get to that other side is you're meant to learn something through that pain or through that difficulty or through that frustration. There's something, and especially what ends up happening too, is the more you resist it, the more you get it.
You resist,
right?
Resist, as they say.
Right, exactly. So it's when you can truly learn what's meant to be learned from whatever the situation is, that you can then take it and apply it to your life and be able to continually move forward.
Yeah. It reminds me, as you're talking about that, of overcoming my own learning disability at a young age. And I think I mentioned this too early on, is that at a young age, I had to make that, I had the understanding that I don't know everything and it's okay to not know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the strength and the ability to seek help on my lunch periods, to seek tutoring, to get that extra support to do well. So I learned at a young age to, like that saying, it takes a village. There's a lot of things that we think that we can do as an individual, but the truth is it's important to seek help, to seek mentors and seek resources. And as a speaker, and you sound like someone that does the same thing, is I want to advocate and inspire young adults to have them realize that it's okay to seek help. Whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
and business people, like I'm sure it takes a lot of them putting their ego in check when they hire a professional, right? A lot of people, why am I spending money on coaching? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? What does this person know? It takes a lot to really say, you know what? I'm going to hire somebody to come in and support my business. How do you find a lot of your clients? How would you describe your typical client, if you could? Is there a way to kind of describe what they are, who they are?
Sure. My clients are extremely driven, and they're not getting the results they want fast enough, and they are frustrated and they are overwhelmed and they are ticked off about it. And usually they've gotten to the point where they're like, enough's enough. I need help. Like, it's beyond my skill set. I need, a mentor, or I need, support.
Yeah. You see that a lot with young adults in today's world. And I know it might be different than your typical clientele, but you see a lot of young adults who, they're like gods at their tips with their phones and technology. And they seem to have a hard time with seeking help, whether they're going through anxiety or bullying or depression or abuse at home or these different things. It seems that young adults have a very difficult time. And something that you talked about is helping them, people go through their challenges and accomplish different things. When I'm in there as a speaker as well, I'm trying to have the young adults look at their difficulties and their challenges, like you mentioned, in a different way. And
Right.
you and I would agree that your pivotal moment and my pivotal moment was my learning disability, and yours was going through the death, and then also those many other challenges that you mentioned. But sometimes when we're going through those challenges, we're like, why is this happening to me? How is this happening to me? I wish this wasn't happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice to those people who are currently going through personal suffering and challenges? And you kind of answered this before, but more at a personal level, not so much a business level, because you've been.
Sure. I've been through it. And I mean, I know exactly what I needed to learn, because I had that same question, by the time, my partner died by suicide. I was like, what the hell? It's been 5 years and just no one will throw me a bone. This is ridiculous. And what it really came down to was I had to work on myself for my own confidence. I was constantly still at that point seeking validation from other people. And by me finally having that realization on the lawn that day that I needed to lead my life for me and not for other people, that was the lesson I ultimately needed to learn. And ever since then, everything has fallen into place for me.
Amazing. What were some of the things that needed to be done, if you don't mind sharing, in your personal and your business life, spiritually, when you were starting to make that transition? What were some of the hard things that you needed to get through to make that happen for yourself?
For myself, I mean, a lot of it stemmed from self-confidence, and I don't know when the confidence dipped at any given point, because I was always, as a child, even people would say, like, you've always been abnormally confident.
Yeah.
Something happened over the course of my relationship with my ex-husband. I was with him for a very long time. It was over 15 years. And it was one of those things, and by the way, we're amicable right now, so there's no harm, no foul, and he knows I talk about this.
Good.
But something happened over the course of our relationship, because we did meet very young, where we kind of both grew up at different rates, different levels. And ultimately we kind of grew apart. And through that growing apart, there was a lot of emotional abuse that happened. I was probably more on the receiving side than on the giving side, but it was just generally a very, very toxic relationship. And through that, I started to doubt my own abilities. I started to doubt how I looked. I started to doubt, my skill sets and what I was doing and how I was providing. I started to take on more responsibility than I really even necessarily had to, because that's one of the things too, especially if you're in a relationship that's, abusive in any way, shape, or form. Ultimately you have a choice, and it's difficult to know and to have the confidence when you can make that decision to leave. And those were the lessons that I really needed to learn, during the course of the divorce and everything else when that had happened. And then that carried into my work life and, my personal life with my son and everything else moving forward. But yeah, I'd say confidence was probably the key thing. I don't remember when it broke down, but when I came out of that relationship, I was a broken girl, and I went through, I called it the hot mess summer. Immediately after my divorce, where it was kind of like I almost like relived my teenage years. And I was a brand new mom too, so that made it like even worse. I drank too much, and I went out too much, and just was not necessarily a good thing. But then once, and really it was my partner who took his life. He was the one that and I'm convinced of this, his purpose in my life was to show me I didn't need anybody to validate me. Because he was the one that kind of flipped that switch in my head that I was good the way I was. I was perfect the way I was. He loved me for it, and I didn't need to change anything. And I finally started to feel secure in myself that I was able to kind of continue to build up that confidence. And it didn't really fully go 360 until I lost him.
It's hard just when you talk to people who have gone through challenge like that, you never want to say to them, well, that's a good thing you went through. That's a good thing that happened. Because, some things are good, some things are bad. It depends on how you look at it, right? But there's always something positive that you can learn from it. So it's not necessarily that you look back and say, I'm glad that happened, but in a way it did happen for a reason. And I like that saying. I'm not sure if you agree with it. Life happens for you, not to you.
Yes, I 100% agree.
When you have the other view, things are happening to me, you play the victim.
Right.
When you play the victim, and I think you would agree. There's a lot of time people are victims, but when you play that and you have that mindset, that mentality, you're not supporting yourself. You're not building yourself up. You're breaking yourself down. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of people who do suffer. There's a lot of people who are victims. But when you make that switch, you start to regain control. And as soon as I met you, Rick, you said confidence. That's so funny because that's one of the two words that come to mind when I first met you, and I still believe this, is confidence and motivation. You're very confident and you're very motivated. And when you bring those two together, that's a powerful woman right there, a powerful person, whether you're male, female, whatever. And those are like the two biggest things that I got from you. And just speaking about confidence and motivation, and I even said to you, and I made a video about your TED Talk, the point that inspired me and interested me the most was when you had a little challenge. Because that can translate to any part. We all have challenges, whether it's giving a TED Talk or everyday life. And to see the way that you overcame that little hiccup in the talk, me personally, I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but I thought it was freaking awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, we should talk about that because it was cut out of the TED Talk. You would never know if you watch it on YouTube now. They cut it out. So what had ended up happening, and this I think is a great lesson. So, I'm a professional speaker, so I've given this talk before. And granted, I prepared as well as I could, for TED. TED's a big deal, right? And what happened was I walk out on stage and I start my talk, and the lights were up probably a little bit more than I would have preferred in the audience. And the middle row, exactly in my line of vision, like straight across, I noticed somehow coincidentally, my boyfriend was like right in the center. I had like 2 or 3 of like my best friends that had come out, and then a whole variety of people, including you, who I had met through networking and stuff like that, that had come out to support me. And they somehow all found each other and had never met each other. And we're all sitting in the same row in the front. And it took me aback. Like I was just like, holy crap, like how did that happen? And I completely lost my train of thought. And I couldn't remember where I was in the talk or anything.
Well, what question was it in that moment that you knew from the beginning of the talk that they were sitting there, or at that moment when you had the hiccup is when you noticed it?
During the pause, that's what it was, because my brain was thinking, how the hell did they all find each other to sit in the same row? And so, I was prepared for it. I had a little note card that kind of had my bullet points on, where I wanted to be when. So I just kind of, as you had mentioned, just took out my card, picked up where I'd left off.
I didn't even notice that. You took out a card for that?
Yeah, I took out a note card.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. I guess I wasn't even focused on that. That's so funny.
So, and I mean, the pause wasn't that long. In my head, it felt like forever. I know when I talked to a few people after it, I think even the videographer was like, oh yeah, it was maybe like 20, 30 seconds. It wasn't that big of a deal.
No.
And to me, like when I came off the stage, I was so defeated because I was just like, oh my God, I've given this talk before and blah, blah, blah. And how did I blank out? And, the way I had initially viewed it though was, okay, well, number one, I know, and this was one of the first times I've ever spoken somewhere where people I knew came out, like you and my friends and stuff like that. It's very, very rare because other gigs I had were paid speaking gigs that they were private or whatnot. So this is one of the first times I had people I actually knew in the audience. And it was funny because my boyfriend had actually asked before we started the talk, he's like, do you want me to like sit in the corner so that you don't see me? And I was like, nah, it's fine. Just, sit wherever. And now I know anytime I'm speaking, if I know people, they're going to have to sit in the back corner. I can't see them because
but now you're more mentally prepared that it's possible. So
that was the lesson. I'm like, okay, well now I know that's gonna.
I thought it was just, it's funny as a viewer. I just thought you had a moment where you maybe lost your place, and that would have been okay too. It's like, listen, you're giving a TED talk. I feel like people could have as many freaking freebie mistakes. You could have done that 20. I mean, there were some people who walked off the stage for a couple of times because there was technical difficulties. And I remember hearing this saying. I don't know if you've heard. I think you've heard this, that like, it's almost like when you make a mistake, you don't even need to comment that you made a mistake. Because like, even if you like had a quick mistake or you stumbled on something, most likely the viewers don't know your talk. They're not going to know, oh, she missed this part or he missed that part,
It's so funny because that's exactly what happened. So I came off the stage. I was kind of defeated. I was like, I've given that talk before. Like I felt like I did okay, but I knew at other events I did like a much better job. And what really changed my thinking on that was during the breaks, during lunch in particular, I got swarmed. So many people from the audience were like, oh my God, like your talk meant so much. I'm so inspired. I'm going to do your 5 C's. And I was like, wow. So that really showed me that like still the message still got through. Right. So I may not have been like 100%, like we are kind of our own worst critics in a way. And yeah, that's exactly what happened. So the message still got through, and the video, they edited it came out great.
Awesome.
You would never know.
And I like that when I sent you that feedback, because we're all here to support each other, and you inspired me, and I applied for a TED Talk for next year.
Yay!
Wish me luck. And I put you as the person who recommended me, which I'm too. But I feel like that's what it is. I feel like the way that you handled that, and I think also the way that you reached out to me. When I made a short video review, I gave a little testimonial from your video, the talk that you gave, and you really appreciated that. You said, yeah, I'm my own worst enemy. And it's so true. I mean, not my own worst enemy, you're my own, your worst critic, right? And that's so true. We're so hard on ourselves. And I'm sure in that moment, if you were coaching somebody, you'd be the same thing. You would be supportive. You would be like, listen, you're your own worst critic. You did great. But isn't it so funny how sometimes it's often harder for us to take our own advice than it is to give it? Would you agree with that? Sometimes it's easier to give it than it is to actually live it sometimes.
I would agree with that. And then I would kind of like elaborate on that a little bit too, because I think one of the greatest hangups for people taking action is because they feel it needs to be perfect, or they feel that they're not ready for it. Where truth is, you need to be doing it so that you understand what does work and doesn't work, so that you can get better at it. Right. So it actually gets easier the more you do it, and you build up that confidence. Right. So I guess that's why, at that point in time, I felt confident. I know I'm a good speaker. I was more disappointed in myself. Like, hey, I've done this before. Like, I don't know where my brain went, for TED. But yeah, with that said, I know, even in coaching my clients, perfectionism is a conversation I have all the time, especially with high achievers, because they are their own worst enemy, because they're either focusing on the attention to detail to the point that the project never gets done, where really it's better just to release it, partially done and test it and see what works and what doesn't work. Or they're just so freaked out by the potential of even having to put themselves out there that they just don't do anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of the 5 C's, right? 5 C's you mentioned during your talk. Can you share with us those exclusive?
Sure. So I call them the overwhelm culprits. And in general, if you're frustrated or overwhelmed with something going on in your life, it's usually one of 5 things that causes it. The first one is a lack of clarity. Second would be your confidence. We've talked about confidence a lot. Unfortunately, that's on you. No one else can make you confident about yourself. The third one is your community, which would be your support circle. You know, who do you have around you? Are they positive? Are they supporting you? Are you getting what you need? Fourth is what I call conditioning, but conditioning means basically your health and mental wellness. How well you're taking care of your body and your mind. Mm-hmm. And lastly is consistency. You know, you can have all the other four, but if you're not consistent in your action, you're not going to get what you want.
Amazing. These are very important, and I'm constantly working on that. And you know, hanging out with you a few times and listening to your TED Talk definitely inspired me to work harder towards my goals. And just for the people watching this who may not know the different services, you offer a bunch of different stuff, and I think you offer a lot of value. And you're speaking from a place of experience. You've lived a packed life. You've had a lot that have happened to you, and you continue to make wonderful things happen in your own life and your client's life. But what are the services that people can reach out to you for?
Sure. So as of right now, I am exclusively offering just one-on-one private coaching for small business owners. So again, I specialize in overwhelm, you know, reducing your overwhelm so that you can scale your business. And I work with both startups as well as established businesses. Both of them have their own unique challenges, but that's the you know, my expertise and my specialty. And then I also do professional public speaking, generally on the same topics. I speak primarily on motivation, productivity, and authenticity.
Cool. Very cool. And where are the different social media pages? As we have a wasp that just flew onto my microphone right here. That's too funny. We're gonna go with the flow. You can't see it right now. Yes, you can see it right there. Can you see it?
Oh my God.
So where can people find you on social media?
I am everywhere. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, at I am Corrie Lo.
Amazing. And I hope to have you on more video chats. I feel like you offer a lot of value. I feel like you and I connect and relate on a lot of different subjects. So hopefully you feel welcome to come back again. Sure. And once this clears up, I want to have you in the studio. As you can see, we got our table over there, and we're completely renovating the podcast studio where we film. And we're also going to be uploading soon to iTunes and Spotify and a bunch of other different places. So
great.
Thank you for joining us. Before I go, though, one last thing. I just thought this in the moment because I like to be spontaneous like you as well. Is there a quote or one piece of advice that you would like to give? It could be something that you share with all your clients or people you love. Is there anything that you want to leave the viewers with to kind of think about as they go through these different challenging times?
Sure. I'd say probably the most impactful quote that's been attributed to me, and it wasn't even something I realized as being something as impactful until I started seeing people tweeting it and stuff after I speak. It's, if you want to lead an extraordinary life, it takes extraordinary action. Well, it's the truth. Yeah. If you want something over and above what you have today, you're going to have to take more action in order to be able to go and get it.
Well, you guys are extraordinary people, the both of you. So listen, Corrie, you're an extraordinary person. I think you're doing extraordinary things. I am extremely Hey, buddy. Hey.
Say hi.
Hey. Hi. You got an extraordinary mom right there.
Go outside in 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes. Perfect. Good timing. So listen, Corrie, I hope you and your family are sending you guys lots of love and good vibes. And I recommend anybody watching this, whether they're friends of mine, to go check out you. If your friends want to check out me and the Paul Vibes, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube and all that good stuff. I'm sending you lots of love, and I hope to connect with you soon.
Sounds good.
Peace.